Welcome, everybody, to the Grind Overwatch podcast, episode 4. I am your host, Nari Mizuki, and with me are my wonderful guests. As per usual, I'm going to do the who are you and why should we care? So I'll start with Dezachu. Who are you? Why do we care?
Hello, I'm Des, one of the Contenders Europe casters. I talk about goats.
Nice.
That's all you need
I feel
to know.
like everyone does that at the moment, to be fair.
Yeah, I've been given the goat herder title in Discord, so I feel quite happy about that.
All right. Next up, we have AlmostPanda. Who are you and why do we care?
I am the coach for Choose Money Crew EU right now, and yeah, we
clapped Angry Titans.
we clapped Angry
Hey.
Titans. That's why I'm here.
Nice. And finally, we have Kephrii. Who are you? Why do we care?
I'm Kephrii. I play Widowmaker, and I guess I joined Contenders, and I'm in Korea.
Hey, nice. Sorry that we had to start late, guys. We had a few issues with our technical stuff, but it is all sorted now. So let's jump right into it. First up, we're going to start with Kephrii. Obviously, there's been a little bit of controversy around you and your being brought into Contenders recently. It started out with a tweet you made to Washington asking for a tryout, massive clapback on the internet. Now, after
Yikes.
that, you've now found a Contenders team. Things are happening. Let's start with, how did you feel once that whole clapback happened? You know, the whole internet was losing their mind. How was that for you?
So that's sweet,
Rough.
man. What a great moment in my life. I want to back up a little bit to save some face here. So I remember there was a lot of people complaining that there was no local players, you know, like geographically, so for example, Boston didn't have Boston players, LA didn't have LA players, like stuff like that. So I thought, well, okay, DC, maybe they'd want a DC player. So that was my first thought. And then the second thought was, well, what's the harm in asking for a tryout, right? Like everybody asks for a tryout. Like usually it's just behind the scenes. So a lot of people were upset that I didn't do it behind the scenes. I actually did do it behind the scenes. I DM'd all 3 coaches.
Wow.
None of them returned a reply. So I got left on
Yikes.
red. I shot an email, and then I thought, you know what? Well, maybe I can do like, hey, look at the support that I could garnish, you know, or bring for our team, you know. So I tried the tweet, you know, and there was
it ain't support, mate. It's gonna be hate.
It was a questionable decision. So you know, so I don't know. A lot of people worded it, and they're like, "Wow, Kephrii thinks he deserves a tryout." I worded it very carefully. I said, you know, I was looking for the possibility to be considered for a tryout. Like, I mean, it was very clear that I wanted them to considering. So that didn't go well. But ultimately, that's actually how I ended up where I'm at. This team actually saw my tweet. And that's the whole reason they messaged me to join Contenders in the first place, was because they saw the tweet. So it kind of worked out. Yeah, it worked. It was just the wrong team. So
Well, I mean, that being said, you did quite well for your first match. There were quite a few. Unfortunately, you only got to play one map, and I wanted to ask about that. So, were you brought on as like a sub, or like a map specific, hero specific, or was this just kind of like, let's get Kephrii in. He'll pop off. Like, how?
You know, these are all great questions. I wish I had the answers to. So I have my theories. So map 1 I couldn't play in regardless. Actually, I got my computer 1 hour before the match started. So I started installing, setting everything up, getting like cause they have their own like game client. I didn't know that. I didn't know Contenders had their own client. So I logged in and I had the wrong settings from like the last dude's profile. It was all scuffed. So they played map 1 without me. Map 2, I think originally they weren't going to throw me in because I didn't have a computer until an hour before the match. So the coach was like, look, this would be irresponsible. It would be like a terrible decision to throw you in here considering you've never played with the team a single time, except for, you know, in NA with 250 ping. So, you know, he said this would be really irresponsible and risky. And so the owner of the organization actually said, you know, I don't give a shit. Like, put in Kephrii, you know. Kephrii's here. The people want to see Kephrii. You throw in Kephrii. So the coach was like, fuck it. So they threw me in map 2. I almost threw on Zarya, and thankfully we recovered. But yeah, so that was pretty much it. It was more of a, let's just see what happens.
That's pretty cool, actually. I think that a lot of people, what I really want to highlight here for a lot of people is there's this idea that you took a shortcut to pro, right? So you've built up a large following for yourself online, and it's this idea that you've kind of abused your brand in order to get into contenders. And I feel like people need to understand that that's not how that works.
I mean, I like the way they think. If that's a shortcut, then I applaud. I implore everyone to go take this shortcut. Good luck building a fan base, and you're saying become one of the top 5% of streamers that actually have viewers and followers. If that's considered a shortcut, then that's something else. But no, I get what they're saying. I get what they're saying. I mean, I was careful before I thought to even ask to go straight into the league. Which, I mean, to be fair, I didn't really ask to go straight into the league. I asked to see if I could get a tryout to go into the league, because I understand if I suck, don't put me in. I don't want to be in somewhere I suck. So I figured there's nothing in the rules that say you must be scouted from contenders. You must play contenders. I want to say there's 1 or 2 players that actually didn't even play contenders. There's obviously the exceptions, but they at least had a professional background. Some people think I didn't have a professional background at all, which isn't technically true. I did play season 1, a couple of games with Liquid. Nothing's too official, but I did play to a degree. But yeah, it's an interesting way of saying shortcut. I was just asking for a tryout to see if I was good enough. I figured, one map you would know, when I feed instantly.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, shortcut to top 500, shortcut to tons of viewers, shortcut to getting a tryout. I mean, it really doesn't sound like a shortcut.
It's different for sure. It's different for sure.
Sounds like the
That's
title of an
100%.
Overwatch YouTuber video, doesn't it? Really, shortcut to top 500, shortcut to Al.
Yeah,
Clickbait.
A little bit.
I might have to use
And that
those
brings-
actually.
You're welcome.
And that brings me to AlmostPanda. So you obviously coaching Shoes Money Crew EU. We've been watching you guys from Open Division. I was working desk back for Open Division, and it was a lot of fun watching you guys play. And you guys came out strong. You even in your show match against Shoes Money Crew NA, you proved you were the superior Shoes Money Crew. But I
That's
think
true.
coming into contenders, nobody really expected you to do this well. We all know, I mean, Trid said it, Angry Titans, easy clap. And apparently not. And I really want to hear, how did your team go from just this open division team that did quite well in such a short space of time to being on the level of Angry Titans? Was there like a special regiment you went through, or are your players just that good?
I mean, we do have very skilled players, but and I actually didn't join until last week, I think, of Open Division, or even after that. So that was all them. But then I actually decided to join because I think all of the players have really good mentality towards the game. I think they are special compared to other players in Europe because they're good at putting their egos aside to lift each other up instead of pulling others down, and when they start losing, they don't go to blame everyone else. They instead work with me together to see how we can fix the problem, and we always have like really good discussions about the game and everything. So I think we just we worked really hard on especially the goats comp. Like people kind of see us as not a goats one trick team, because we do have really amazing players playing like Sombra, Doomfist and everything, but we became really good at goats, and then we got completely smashed 4-0 by 1 point in the first game, and it was kind of embarrassing. But I worked with the team, and we actually, during the week between 1 point and Angry Titans, we actually found a very solid goat strat that works for us. So we actually were super confident going in against Angry Titans that we would win, and yeah, you see what happened. They underestimated us. Everyone did. So yeah, they had no clue on how to play against us, and then we just kind of let it go on the last map and lost. But hey, we had already won by then.
Yeah, well, that's the most important part. And I mean, it's not just Angry Titans. You guys did phenomenally well against British Hurricanes. Okay, let's take a moment. You guys didn't win, But a 2-1 scoreline tells me that there was a draw somewhere in there. And the fact that you also took a map, that is for if somebody watching hasn't actually watched the games, this is just a little interpretation of the scoreline, right? Because the scoreline normally doesn't give an accurate representation of how the games went, but I feel like that's pretty good. That was a really close match. You guys have improved so much. So you're focusing a lot on your goats composition at the moment. Do you feel like playing a superior goats is worth more than playing a superior anti-goats?
Right now in the current meta, since we are like playing the tournament on the old patch, so we don't have Ash, and then we won't get the Brig nerf patch either to play on. I think goats are definitely the strongest. And it's not like we're sure like people don't see behind the scenes and screams and stuff, but I think every team has tried out playing anti-goats comps, but it's just like in Europe our teamwork is so good that when you can perfect the goats comp, there's all the counter comps doesn't even work. Like if you see against British Hurricane, for example, our game on Hanamura, they tried triple DPS because they knew it would goats, and they still didn't do anything against us until they switched to goats themselves. And even then, we drew the Hanamura map. So I think right now goats comps is really good, and yeah, getting good at that is more important than playing anti comps, I think.
Your second half of the series against Hurricane was really impressive, actually. Like that's when we all of us kind of looked at each other in the studio and we were just like, these guys are actually really showing up. In the first half, it was kind of like they're playing okay, but kind of the dream's over now. You know, it's back to normality where they will be one of kind of the bottom half teams. But I think after that win against Angry Titans and then showing up the way you did against Hurricane the other day, you know, you guys are actually now in a really good spot coming into the final 2 weeks to take a spot where you've got August and Hungary and we have Org remaining, right?
Yeah, I think.
And they're 2 games I would now favor you guys to take as well, based on how you
I
played.
think we've now played the strongest teams in our group and are left with a.
Oh,
I wouldn't say
you had the gauntlet run and you got
I
one
wouldn't.
win.
Yeah, I
Can't
wouldn't
wait.
say the bad teams, but the weaker teams in our group for sure. Especially now that Orglis and Hungary lost Danad to British Hurricane.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
So, yeah, getting that win against Agri Titans, it's, like, yeah, it's opened a path. Now we can take.
It's all about them
playoffs
paths.
if we.
It's them pass, boys.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
that's it exactly. The difference between the two paths that have been taken here. Kephrii using his not using, but kind of using his platform. Let's be
Leveraging.
real about it. Leveraging. Thank you. That is a much better word. Leveraging his platform as a way to get
Utilizing.
his yeah, there you go. As a way to kind of get the upper teams to notice him, because obviously he's made a name for himself as a phenomenal Widowmaker player. We know that. There's no question about that. It's just about getting that opportunity to get a tryout, as opposed to a team.
So can I get out of this square? How do I get out of here?
It's okay. It's okay.
You're triggering Reddit. I can feel it. Oh,
You can already
It's
feel the
okay.
pitchforks just stabbing you in the backside already.
Reddit's just full of Lucios, to be fair. And that's like a quite a vast difference to a team like Shoes Money Crew, who have entered into open division, climbed their way up through the ranks. They don't have the same kind of support, the same kind of social media presence, but they're making a name for themselves. And this really just goes to show there is no one true path to pro. If you go onto the Path to Pro website, they're going to tell you buy the game, start playing, join comp, create a team, join open division, and they've got this whole path set out for you. And that's not the only way that you can succeed in Overwatch. There are other ways to do it, and I feel like that's just been proven by these two people right here with me.
There's one very common theme when you think about it, though, in terms of skill, right? But this is a message that I think a lot of like you'll see tweets about it every now and then when someone retweets it and the chains kick off. Is that for a lot of players, like you go onto their Twitter and they have 30 followers. And it's like, if you really want to get yourself noticed, it's a case of being good at the game and having that brand alongside it. And Kephrii's brand is far stronger than most. So it's put him in a good position now where he can show off his skills and get to playing contenders. Whereas for a lot of other players, like you say, I imagine a few who, you know, of course, no offense to Kephrii, are probably on that sort of level where they can play mechanically well, like he can have been high in competitive play. They won't get noticed because they've tried to fight for open division, found themselves in a number of unlucky circumstances, and then kind of given up as they've realized it's a really hard grind to get to that point. So the whole
And
brand
it's
building thing
hard.
is really important. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of politics to it too. I don't know how to pronounce the word. I'm not a smart guy. It's like nepotism
only.
or nepotism, something like
Nepotism.
that. Yeah, nepotism. I had it right the first time. All right, cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in Overwatch. You know, I'm pretty much proof of it. You piss off the wrong people, you're gonna have a hard time getting anywhere. So you can be you can be the greatest player in the game, and it won't matter if you're pretty much unlikable. So you know, that's another aspect to it as well.
Which just absolutely ties into your brand as well. I mean, building your brand is so much more than just being a good player and being on Twitch. There's a guy in ZA who is a top 500 hit scan player, phenomenal Widowmaker as well. And I think he's got like 20 followers on Twitter. And every now and then he streams and he plays an open division with a South African team, but he's not getting that exposure. Like your brand is worth so much in conjunction with your skill. One without the other is very difficult to make a name for yourself with. But Shoes Money Crew, hey, like they're making their brand, and that's fantastic. And that's it. So you start with your success, and your success starts to build your brand. The two are so inexorably intertwined. It's actually quite nuanced.
I banged on about a few of the players on broadcast about from Shoes Money Crew, with Miles especially. I remember back in season 1, he was a bit of a tracer one trick and was kind of one of those players who you kind of put in the box to the side and say they're here, but they're not really shining. This season, he's looking shit hot. And I'm like, what's happened in the last 2 seasons? Well, clearly they got an amazing coach on side, and AlmostPanda, turned him into a god overnight, apparently. It just goes to show that just by being surprising people, that in itself is brand projection. Just by being like, whoa, this guy was like, not so much a nobody, but no one really recognized him 2 seasons ago. And now suddenly he's one of the hottest Sarias we've got in Contenders. That's a huge step up and a really good brand builder.
Yeah, I mean, he's also very mad at you for calling him a tracer one tricker special.
Yeah.
he always comes to me and can you tell him to stop doing that? But I mean, it's pretty fun.
How's my man? DM me. We'll have this out. Cool.
But no, yeah, I think he shines a lot, especially in goats and on his Zarya, because right now we kind of figure out the playstyle. So you see players from one point like hardest, and then we have Mouse's Zarya like really shining compared to other Zaryas in contenders, and that because I think right now us 2 teams have, especially in Group B, we are the ones that have really figured out goats, and I think if the other team's coaches or anything can find the secret that we're using, sure, good luck, use it. But until then, we're just gonna keep stomping you guys.
It's great because I remember back when the team was That's a Disband, like all these guys played together on That's a Disband before, right? Like back in season 1, that team did not have a good run, and now they're back in a different name and they're beating top tier teams. That just goes to show again that things can change so quickly, just based on environment, based on time. Like, if players get lost during open division, like I mentioned earlier on, there's still every possibility they'll step up and show what they're really made of, which is exactly what these guys have done. And, fair play, good for them. Miles, you're not a one trick anymore. Good job, buddy.
Good job.
I'm trying to trick him now. I'm waiting for
How many games did it take him to get rid of the one trick title? I need to get in on this.
About 3 seasons of Contenders, mate.
3
Rice and
seasons,
beans.
I'm screwed.
Well, you're off to a good start.
I only played Widow. I'm off to a terrible start.
Yeah, don't worry. Soon they'll bring in Ashe in Contenders. You can play 2 heroes then.
Hey.
I think we have to make playoffs for that. So
I'm
excited.
right.
I'm excited.
I mean, you're on the right way to do
hard
it.
carry, dude.
I'm on the right path. Oh,
Hey, that's terrible. But you are on season 1 of Contenders. Well, your first season, let me put it that way. And hopefully we're going to be seeing a lot more of you going forward. I think one of the things that one of the PAC casters said that like really stuck with me and made me chuckle. He was like, he saw you on Widow and somebody on Genji, and he was like, "It's Christmas early." I absolutely loved it. So I mean, you got even more eyes on you now. I think everybody's really excited to see what you're going to bring going forward, and especially with the new break changes that are coming in. Segue into our next topic. I think that I need to hear your opinions. There's been a lot of opinions about the new break changes and what they might do to the meta. At the moment, I've heard 2 kind of conflicting arguments. The one argument is more healing means stronger goats, right? Nobody's going to die. You can just fight forever. Goats will prevail. On the other hand, there's the argument that Brigitte's damage being nerfed means that there is a lot less damage in the composition. Added to that, the fact that she can no longer stun through shields it means there's no stun shatter, there's no opening up for Zenyatta Discord, none of those things that create opportunity for damage to be dealt. Therefore, nothing is going to die. Tons of healing, all out brawls on the point for 10 minutes, and the point still hasn't been unlocked, and teams are going to be finding new ways to move forward and to counter that new composition. So I want to hear let's start with Des, our resident goats aficionado. Goat herder, there we go. I like that. What are your thoughts on the coming changes with Brig and how they will affect the meta?
I think saying that it's going to take all the damage out of the comp is probably a bit of an overreaction, because all they're really seeing is that the damage is dropping from 50 to 5 on the bash itself. It does mean that basically you might see a tracer every now and then, because they're not getting one shot every time they step in range of Brigitte. It's a bit of a nerf as well to a style of Brigitte play we've seen in EU called what we're calling Leaf Brigitte. Basically, where the Brigitte ignores everyone and you just beeline straight for the Zen and murder the Zen. You don't care about anything else, because that way the rest of the team basically just runs in. They either choose to try and save the Brigitte and die themselves, or they have to stay and fight against the 5 stack coming against them, and then the Zen dies anyway. It's really hard to deal with, and some teams have got it down really, really well. I think with the healing thing, yes, the shield thing is the really big change, because now it's super hard to do the trade that you normally see where you get a Brigitte shield bash down, Discord follows immediately onto the Reinhardt, you wait for that either to come through with a cleanse from the Zarya with a projected barrier, or you just go all in as soon as that cooldown is back offline again. You can't do that anymore so easily. It's going to be a lot more scrappy, and I think you're going to see a lot more Moira than what you see with the Zenyatta base sort of comp now, which is a shame, because we've only had about a season and a half.
I don't think you're going to see it. I think Zen will still stick around, just due to the fact that armor stacks underneath the shield. It still makes Zen extremely unkillable. There'd still be no reason not to run it. It's
that constant question, right? Of is the heal based goats versus the killing goats?
Yeah, because Moira is real hard by the diva, so Moira is not going to have an easy time.
That's if we still see the diva, right? We're seeing stuff in contenders.
Diva never goes away. Diva's here to stay, man.
We've seen 3 teams run May goats this week. We've seen a couple of teams experiment. I'll say experimenting because it hasn't gone well. A couple of teams experimenting with Rhine, Winston, Zarya, which is a bit different. There's teams trying different things out to try and surprise the other side. And Winstrike, rightly so, in their second week, they took that series away because the other side just could not respond to that goats coming out with the May in there. Really, really smart move by them.
I think a lot of people aren't they're not experienced playing against Mays. It's just something, even with our team, when we were doing scrims, I remember trying to bowl out the May, and my team was like, yeah, please don't ever do that again, and then once we started scrimming, I showed them no, look, May's but she's May kind separates of a shit. Man. Come on, she can put you up and grab, separate, go. She's got a lot of potential. So once she's great, dude. I love her. I think once people learn how to play against May, they'll realize that she can be easy to kind of shut down.
Yeah, no, I especially think there are very hard counters, like changing playstyle and stuff to counter May, but at the same time, it's right now it's only Winstrike in the EU that plays May goats, and if you are in their group, they probably won't scream you, so you have no clue on how to play against it. But for example, us that are in this other group and we actually scream against them, they're still, even though we know how to kind of counter it, they're still really good at it, and
it's still
an amazing May. Holy shit!
I can't remember who ran it the other day. There was a couple of teams it was on Lijon Mecha base where they both ran the May goats. It wasn't Winstrike, and I can't think of who the hell it was now. We have seen 3 teams play it. It's not kind of carried on throughout the whole series. Admittedly, that's probably the best part about it. Otherwise, it would have been double bloody blizzard going down everywhere, and you'd never be able to see anything. Not that you can in goats anyway, but it'd be even worse with the double blizzard going down.
I mean, it's easy to see everything because everyone is standing still in that meta. So
it's so bizarre, dude. Graviton Search goes down, then everyone gets frozen. It's just God. Nightmare.
How do you cast that?
You just go. You just go. Yeah, well, Winter has descended, and helpful basically.
Fantastic. So what do we say? So potentially May being a stronger pick in goats after the Brig changes. The other heroes possibly.
I honestly
don't think so.
I don't think the meta will change that much. I think in competitive, in ladder, in ranked, I think the brig change is huge, and all the Tracer one tricks will come
Yeah.
out of their caves, rubbing their hands like, oh,
Yeah.
my time to shine now.
It's time,
it-
boys.
Yeah,
But
but
they'll be
in,
taking advantage of lack of communication,
yeah.
essentially, and
but
coordination.
in pro play in Scream, like there's no way you get a brig stun on a Tracer, she's dead
Yeah.
100%, even though she does a
Yeah.
one shot as brig. But the thing is, I think many people will see the brig change like, oh, nice, runners out of the picture. Let's start running monkey goats instead, because then
Mhm.
you don't like. You can just they're not gonna run Rhine, so we can just monkey goats. But then, what's the counter to monkey goats? Yeah, normal goats, and
Yeah.
then the enemy team can stun your monkey with a Brigitte because he doesn't have a barrier. So it
Yeah.
just loops around, and I think it's gonna be more.
It's just the
more
counter
of a-
goats.
Yeah, it's gonna be more of a mind game in switching comp next meta than it is right now.
Which could turn into, if both teams mastered it and it became just switching goats, it could actually
Yeah,
turn
half
into
team
an
just
old.
AFK in spawn.
It could even
just
turn into
switch.
old school coin flip, where
Yeah.
whoever attacks or offends first, based on the rotation of the swaps, automatically wins or loses if they play it right. So
yeah, I mean, it's funny
yeah.
you say that, because literally we saw it the other day in your series, Panda, actually, in that first point on Mecha Base, I think it was. Hurricane won that first point with the really weird, what was it? Hammond, Sombra,
Hammond,
Doomfist.
Monkey, Sombra, Doomfist, yeah.
And they literally just chained all after all after all, and you guys just couldn't respond to that. And they got that 100-0, even though you guys then came back on the second point and had 99-99. Like, Goats is exactly the same as that. Like, you start getting that alt chain rolling on. We saw it in Angry Titans versus We Have Org on Hanamura, especially. You can just keep on doing this to people, and it's really horrible when you lose that first fight, because it is a very big uphill climb to get back in, and you have to almost force them into making a mistake before you can really capitalize.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think goats versus goats though. I think it's first fight is not super important. Sure, like you get the extra percentage and stuff, but on the second fight, you always both teams most likely will have 75% plus on their ults anyway.
Yeah.
So it depends on how you fight the second fight, and but for us it was we thought that they wouldn't run goats on the drama map, so we didn't roll out with it, which basically means that we had to run back to spawn and switch, which gave them free percentage. So I think that was a losing factor, especially on that. Is it called Sanctuary or the drum map? I don't remember, but
I don't know the map names. Yeah.
I just played the game, or I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
Overwatch.
Exactly. I just played the game.
Pro players, by the way. Shoot, I was gonna ask something. Carry on.
Oh, I was gonna say, to tie into that original comment of how you're talking about the healing getting increased. So it's actually interesting that they increased the healing, considering that when Ashe comes out, she essentially, cool, you throw a grenade in there, you pop it, everyone takes damage. With that increased healing, it kind of offsets her healing, and you'll just be feeding support ultimates. So I just saw people in the chat asking about Ashe. I almost think that Ashe will just be an ultimate feeder, and you're not ever going to get to really see much of Ashe either with all the barriers.
Yeah.
she will become a reverse roadhog where she feeds.
Yeah, exactly. A reverse. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, she won't get played in that Goats meta, I don't think. You'll see her another time, maybe. But
I mean, I see her potential though, because
Oh,
if
Yeah,
you
I see
look-
the
absolutely.
potential.
since the Brigitte stun nerf, that means like Sen will be not unviable, but he will be less OP as he is right now. I think if teams were to run, for example, Ana and Ashe, their diva has to, and they split them up. Their diva
It's
has
too
to
much to
look,
hit, yeah.
left and right all the time, because she cannot. I mean, sure, if the diva is super good, like she can probably eat the both Ana nade and the dynamite pack, but that's not gonna
You
happen.
split it
So
up, yeah.
yeah, so I think there's a better potential of playing anti-goats next meta.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, do you guys see a world where there's like a Super McCree style composition where you're swapping Ashe in instead?
Instead of
yeah, the
Basically,
Glad
in
comp.
place of the
McCree,
McCree,
yeah.
Yeah,
the McCree
no.
comp where you're normally playing with like Zen, Brigitte, and then you have your dive tanks in front.
the
Usually,
only
you
reason I would
basically
say
put
no
everything on
to
him.
not. I don't think Ashe can take Kree's place in Kree comp for two reasons. One is that Ashe's reload is so long that she'll never be able to break the shields the same way McCree's fan the hammer does. And then at the same time, McCree still has a stun, whereas Ashe just doesn't have that stun. So like that oh shit card.
Yeah, and
Bob, though.
also, yeah,
Yeah.
true, Bob, but
The
like
most
the thing-
inconsistent AI in the game. Yeah.
Yeah. But that team comp also relies a lot around that McCree do have one of the highest damage outputs, but he has very low mobility.
Yeah.
So if you have that comp, you
Mm.
can literally just have McCree being invincible, and he can just dish out damage. So I think his damage output outweighs Ash's quite a lot.
Fair enough.
Just more utility in that scenario, in that team environment.
So what I also wanted to ask was, quite recently, we've been seeing a huge uprising in different compositions. Okay, EU and NA have pretty much been like goats v goats. But in other regions, there's been a lot of double sniper, Doomfist, Sombra. There's been dive. There's been a lot of different compositions. Now, do you think that once the Brig change comes in, everyone is just going to kind of reset back to goats? Or do you think that maybe other compositions are going to start shining a lot brighter now coming into it?
I mean, the same patch as Brig gets nerfed, also Doomfist gets nerfed, so it's kind of hard to say. Like, for example, if you look at Dana, he streamed yesterday and he said Doomfist is dead next patch. I might as well play him as much as I can now. So, about that, yeah, sure, maybe double sniper or something, but Doomfist is not looking too good for next patch.
Really, so the reason Ghosts is so strong is it's like, almost you see it in ranked. Almost anybody can play goats, even without the communication aspect, and it's still strong. But once you add the communication aspect, that's what makes goats so unbelievably hard to beat. The reason I think that you're seeing all these different comps that come out of the other regions is since there's no real hard counter to goats. When you look at the actual coding of the game, like these are the abilities you get. Here's how you can counter them. The only other way to counter it is through user error. And you can, if you're so damn good on one hero that you can outplay the enemy team on their goats, then you can try it. And I think that's why a lot of these regions are trying, double sniper or, Doomfist Sombra, these other things, because sure, they're really good on goats, but they're probably not as well versed on goats as you are on those heroes against goats. So like, for example, when I played Widow into goats, sure, they know how to play goats, but I know how to play Widow into almost anything after 1200 hours. So it forces them to swap it up. So I think that's why other regions are trying different things. They're starting to realize, hey, we don't only have to play goats. If we're better than their goats, we can play other things.
Yeah, it's the evolution of the meta, right? And it's the same in any game you look at. Like, people will see if something becomes de facto and the norm, people will start devising things to break it. And again, going back to the whole May Goats thing, right? Like, it upset a Goats team. And although that won't be the long-term answer, probably, there will be other teams that do come up with ideas on how to beat it. Admittedly, NA, I think, now has finally realized it's not just a case of playing double projectile or anything like that. You do have to get a little bit more creative than that, because sometimes the most obvious answer doesn't always come to you immediately and isn't the best solution.
Yeah, no. Mayhem Academy is one of those teams. They really try and not play goats. They really try and just play anti-goats and counter-goats or whatever comp they
I don't
find.
blame them, man. They are the scientists in NA Contenders.
I mean, I think it's
I
fun.
support that stuff.
I think it's
well,
fun
they're
what
getting
they try
flack
do.
to it. They're getting a lot of flack for it too, because people are saying that they're just not good enough to practice goats or be better at goats. So they have to try to find ways around it instead of taking the time to improve. Like, they're getting a lot of shit for it too, which is strange.
man.
But
I don't buy that.
that's what scrims are for. Scrims are for theory crafting and trying to find other ways. The meta would never change if people didn't try.
No,
Exactly,
for sure.
man.
I had another question, but my brain is terrible. Oh no! It was such a... Oh yes. Ha ha. I remember now. The thing is, I've forgotten it like 3 times in the last since I came up with it. So I'm really happy I remember it in time. So basically, there is a belief that... Okay, I'm going to start with somebody on a broadcast said that they feel like they prefer goats to dive, right? And somebody in the South African community lost her mind. She was like, I can't believe they've said this. How can you prefer this composition, dive, which takes so much skill and coordination and communication? How can you not prefer that over a composition that's basically hold W and left click?
It's almost like you're slating someone for saying they prefer something, an opinion.
Yeah, it is an opinion. And also, it's funny because goats isn't just hold W and left click. I mean, that's ranked.
Yeah, that was going to be my
That shows
question.
gross misunderstanding.
That's ranked in a nutshell. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty much what a one trick, and that's what I thought. I said, oh, hold left click, go in. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Once you learn that there's combos and there's things that have to be timed and things that have to be done, and it's almost like I don't know, maybe this is a terrible analogy, but it's almost like a fighting game. Like, if you screw up a combo, there's a chance for counterplay there.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so the enemy, like if I waste my freaking Zarya bubble, I'm gonna have a bad day. We're gonna lose that team fight just for that one misclick. If the enemy team sees it, I'm like, I'm screwed. I just threw. So there's a lot of actual counterplay. In fact, if everyone knew the inner workings of how goats worked, I would almost argue that it would actually be enjoyable to watch. I know that sounds terribly like awful to say, but if
I think it's more
everyone
enjoyable to
knew,
watch. Yeah.
But
the
you
problem
understand the
is
nuance.
the problem is you have to
Exactly, yeah.
understand it. Yeah. And the thing with dive is you didn't really have to understand. People connect to a target, the target dies.
Yeah.
Goats, you have to understand all the mechanics and the communication, the coordination, yada 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 yada. So I mean, I see why people liked it, but I mean, goats isn't even like that new of a thing. Before dive, we had like that triple tank meta back in a few seasons back that was pretty rampant. It's almost just like that again.
I mean, it started in season 2 or 3, I think, with Ninja Super
Yeah.
Jonas pulling out
Yeah,
the
Roadhog with the Ana.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the tag compositions have been there forever. It's just now it's so teamwork based that it's super like I
Yeah.
understand that the average viewer find it hard to watch because it's like, oh, you send a bunch of meaty guys into each other and whoever has most luck or whatever just wins. But it's like
Yeah.
the science behind goats is so
There's a
difficult.
lot of intricacies. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's why Europe is right now the best region for playing goats. I think from what we've seen season 2, Eagle Gaming, they perfected goats, if you
Oh
ask
god,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
But even now, like I think I watched Contenders NA and Contenders Korea, and their goats play like it's so subpar compared to EU, if you ask me. Like a show match right now against probably 1 point against the best Korean team or the best NA team, 1 point would stomp them all. So
It just reminds me back of the Atlantic Showdown back in season 1. On dive, NA clapped us, and we were just like, yeah, boys, goats it out, and we actually rolled them hard. Yeah. Oh, it's quad tank back then, actually. That was the best part. That's how the meme has evolved now. We've kind of found that happy middle ground where it's not quad tank, it's not like 4 tanks, but we've gone down to 3.
I liked quad tank because they didn't
like
move.
it all, man. I think it's all
right
great.
now, right now, it's like quad tank and dive had a baby, and it just fucking runs at you so fast.
Yeah, man.
At least quad tank was slow, and you could just they're coming at me. It's inevitable, but I can see it slowly happening.
Yeah, dude. What can I say?
See your life flashing before your eyes in slow motion.
Yeah.
But it's like you guys were saying about the whole dive versus goats thing, though, right? Like, his dive is really fun and flashy to watch. Like, everyone loves seeing the Genji get nano bladed, jumps up in the air, whips out the blade, and kills everyone. It's really cool to watch. It's exciting for a viewer. It's easy to understand. The problem with goats is so much of the minutia comes down to things like a Brigitte running in off screen, shield bashing the Reinhardt, then running off against her so she doesn't die, just so they can connect an Earth Shatter. All you see is an Earth Shatter, and you're like, oh, his shield was down. What the hell was that? You missed that play. It's the same with things like the one that became really famous for us last season was what we call the Giganti Bomb, where you get the Graviton Surge down, your Rhine then charges their Rhine out of the mix, and the Zelda shot kills everyone.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And Brigitte is now an evolution to that, right? But it's small things like divas flying in and booping the tanks away. It's Brigitte getting the big stun off as well. It can be a clutch defense matrix. They're just really small things that don't require a lot of movement on screen for them to have a huge impact. And that's why people get frustrated watching goats so much.
And
that's exactly what we saw in the World Cup with Kib and Fusions. Everybody was losing their minds about. I'll admit, even I was. That does I do analysis for South American contenders. So I have that brain, but when I'm watching a game just purely for the enjoyment, so I'm watching World Cup and I just want to have fun, and I see Fusions getting all of these things, and I'm like, whoa, Fusions, best main tank in the world. And then he tweets out, by the way, Kib set up like every single one of those shatters, and I was like, duh! There's so much more to it than just Ryan ran in and hit Q.
Yeah, everyone screams Fusion's named. Yeah. It's tough life being a Brig main, man. You stuck in Brig jail.
I mean, at least both of them got picked up to Overwatch League. So
hey, man, there you go.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's good.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing that people are arguing or fighting against goats. It's just all of these stellar DPS players. I mean, Kib, we saw his Roadhog in the World Cup as well. He's a phenomenal hit scan player, and he's been relegated to Brig for the rest of
I think that's
season.
The big issue is that people want to be entertained. Obviously, it's a game. You gotta have, and then when you get into the Overwatch League, it's an entertaining show now. So now you have to actually have people watch your show. So I think part of the problem is that the metas are going on too long. so they need to switch up the metas more often. And the thing that I was trying to stress was that I think that it would be more successful overall, like the Overwatch League, Blizzard's viewership, all that stuff, if it moved from a GOATS meta to a hit scan meta. And I'm not saying that biased because I play Widowmaker. What I'm saying is when I first played Overwatch, I remember spectating a Reinhardt when I didn't know the game, and I was like, what the hell am I watching? But I can tune into a CS:GO match at any time with no background, and I know you point and click. It's easy to watch. It's easy to understand. So I think that a hit scan meta would increase viewership overall because people wouldn't have to understand the game as much. They can just understand the concept of point and click, and that would also drive up your higher skilled players that are stuck in GOATs. I just think overall and I think that's why Ash was released. I think they're trying to shift to that hit scan meta. It's not working, but they got to do it slowly. So I think that's where it's moving. I hope. No, mic muted.
No,
we're good.
No, you're good.
No?
We
Oh,
can...
okay. My screen popped up. Oh, that's the Skype. That's right. Okay. So I think it's throwing me off, man. So I think that's where it's going. But the viewership aspect, the metas are going on a little too long, especially with the GOATs.
You touched on a really interesting point there. I was speaking to some coaches and analysts the other day around bans in Overwatch and whether or not it should be a thing. One of them was in the chat earlier, actually, Gizmo. And we were speaking about it, and there was a big discussion around, is the game fundamentally a MOBA or is it an FPS? And when Widowmaker and such is in the meta, it feels a lot more like an FPS. When a lot of the stuff is based on abilities and ultimates like it is with this GOATS one, it feels a lot more like a MOBA. And MOBAs fundamentally have the problem of, if you don't play the game, if you don't understand the game, you're not going to be able to watch it and enjoy what's going on the screen. I remember when I first watched League of Legends about 6 or 7 years ago, I was like, who the hell is that? And what the hell do those blue circles around them do? It was so unfortunately got updated. Whereas with something like CSGO, like you said, I think it is the best esport you can watch because you can not play that game. You can understand immediately as soon as you tune in what's going on, who's winning, and how they're winning. And that's a problem that you'll have with Overwatch.
You don't even need to understand the economy of the money. You don't need to understand anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, this guy killed that guy. Cool. They killed all 5 members. They win the. It's that simple. That guy's got a bigger gun. He's probably going to win. If he doesn't, oh, cool. Super high moment.
And I think that's the downside of having a first person. I mean, this is a first person MOBA essentially. I mean, it's League of Legends first person. That's what they created.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so hard to view and understand, right? Especially, I mean, Dive is hard because everyone fast and to keep track of 12 characters darting around at the speed of sound. GOATS is hard because there's so much happening in such a small, compact space. And it shows that at both ends of the meta we've had, it's still very hard to watch, right? There's no happy middle ground with Overwatch, it feels
I think it's one of the hardest esports to be a shot caller or coach in as well, because the aspect is it's both a MOBA and an FPS. So you gotta take account in their ults and stuff like in a MOBA. But then also the rotations and hero switching that's never been super seen before in any esports, and now you have to press tab every 10 seconds to see if enemy
so it's
switches
funny that you
or
say
something.
that. Because what throws me off, and so I'm new to this competitive scene, right? I played way back in season 1 before things were super established. It was that was go-to gamer days, and that was a long time ago. So I'm just not showing up, and I'm learning, coaches can't even talk during games and stuff like that, which blows my mind because every other game the coach can talk. Usually you have the guy that sits behind the team at LAN, helps be that extra set of eyes that sees everything, coaches the players in the game. Like in Halo, your coach gives you timers, spawns, rotations. So it's really strange that the coach can't say, hey guys, you're staggering, or I don't understand why the coach's job ends when the game starts. So that seems to confuse me.
It's really hard as a coach. In scrims, for sure, sometimes I unmute myself and yell at the players what the bleep are you doing, and step up. But most of the time I speak in between maps, tell them okay, we focus on this and stuff. And then when we play in contenders, it's even harder because then I cannot even spectate in game, so I have to sit and just listen and try and figure out what's going on the screen.
And it's strange
just by ear.
The better coaches it'd be so much easier to sell coaches to teams and sell yourself as a coach when you can do ultimate tracking on your little pen and paper, sitting behind the players, that Ryan, a tally board. Ryan swung 5 times, 6 times. You start counting up ult timers. It would open up a lot more for coaches to actually be marketable and useful. And it's just very strange to me. I don't understand why they can't talk, when if both talked, it would just create who's the better coach. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's a weird dynamic to me. I'm not understanding.
It's the same in League and CS. It's the same though, right? You don't have coaches. They sit behind the stage and get a script. And it seems to be the way in most major esports. That's the way it's going. I guess the question then is, but you look at conventional sports like football, you can shout from the sideline quite happily. So I get your point. It's interesting. It'd be an interesting one to explore for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard though, because as like if you were allowed to spectate and then also talk, sure, they can disable that you cannot see ultimates and enemy hero picks. But as soon as you see their entire comp and they switch a pick, you can see it, call it out, and like ult tracking is, as someone who's played this game for 2 years and been a like semi-pro for like over 1 year, it's very easy to ult track, and that would basically be cheating, because then your like main ult tracker and stuff, they get relieved of so much work, so they can like almost 100% focus on the game instead. And I think that would be sure if both coaches could do it, but it feels still like too strong. So I think right now, just like in Overwatch League, for example, where the coaches talk in between rounds and stuff, and then they're muted, I think it's right now the best thing.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts having it this way. I just thought it was strange, you know. I don't think it'll hurt not letting them talk. I think if you let them talk, it can make both teams play a lot better. Obviously, I'd be interested to see how it works, but I mean, obviously, there's no negative. I guess I just thought it was odd, you know, coming into the scene like, what the hell is this?
No,
What do you mean I can't talk? Especially because my coach is the bilingual one, so that's why I'm upset. Because my coach is the bilingual one, and the rest of my team is full Korean. Right? Yeah, so I don't understand a single thing going on.
Yeah,
so I really wish he could translate for me mid game. But
I feel that. Yeah,
that must be amazing. You just hear your name and then like some sounds that you don't recognize, and it's like, okay, are they praising? Did I do wrong? Should I move? Should I?
We were testing May in a scrim once, you know, and they didn't know how to tell me to drop the wall. So we came into an agreement that if my team just yells no, that means, you know, you drop the May wall.
No,
it's
so
a learning
do it.
experience, you know.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting, and the thing is, a lot of coaches speak to. I imagine Panda can kind of sympathise with this as well. Is that often the intent for a coach is to build players into not so much coaches themselves, but that they have the ability to think on their feet. You're not just following a strat the coach has laid out, and you're there as the pawn to implement it. You're having to think on your feet and adapt on the fly. It's almost like you're thinking like the coach itself. You're being taught to think for yourselves. And the more I've spoken to coaches this season, especially, the more they're paying attention to players that are coachable, that will listen, that will grow from that, rather than just being high-skill players. And it's a very interesting transition compared to a few seasons ago.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I'm working very hard on doing that with my players, just like getting them into like really professional habits, like for example even outside of the game, like not eating too much bad stuff, being outside every day, and like I'm trying to get them to like think as me in game as well, like, oh, okay, do they have any, are they making the same mistakes every time, can we punish that? And like, so I'm basically just losing my own job by teaching them how to play the game properly. But
that was something I thought about too.
Is weird, isn't it?
If every player could play the game at the mental level that the coach can see, in theory, you shouldn't need a coach if your team's that good.
No, for sure not. No. So
coaching yourself into obscurity.
That's kind of why I had that thought of why can't the coach talk mid game, because now he is marketable somewhere. Because if the players do know as much as the coach, and the coach does his job right, he essentially gets fired. So I mean, you know, I think the only way to make him actually useful is if he can stay mid match. You know, so I guess it's, you know, right now you just hope the players don't learn, I guess, to an extent, but still win.
Yeah, I hope the players learn enough, but not too much. Yeah, it's gotta find that balance, I guess.
Well, there's an interesting suggestion that came through from Trid in the chat there, and he's saying something along the lines of a free cam spectator ability for coaches, but with a kind of a fog of war effect. So anything that my players can't see, I can't see. And as he mentions,
Blizzard's devs are probably sat there prepping the news right now, thinking about how the hell they'd implement that.
I think realistically, you just have to make it where you're locked between first-person view of all of your team. Like, you know, I think that'd be the only way to do it.
But then again, it's still really hard because a lot of teams usually rely on vocal supports and tanks. So then you could basically have your coach on like the least vocal player in your team and just come for that person or something, and it was just like.
I mean, that would make the coach valuable, though. You know?
I mean, you're not wrong. So
it gives them a job.
Something.
it just opens up another avenue. I think coaches kind of get screwed with the way the system is, at the moment. But I mean, this is, like I said, I just showed up. I'm not trying to stir the pot that early. I've done that enough.
No,
Yeah, I think that.
it's hard.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, it's I didn't have anything. I'm just It's hard
Okay.
being a coach.
Chipping in.
I was about to say, I'm here to listen to you. So if I start talking and you guys want to say something, you can 100% interrupt me. Just reminders to the chat. If you guys do have questions for our guests, please do put them in the chat. If we've got some time later, we will attend to those. Our lovely producer will be looking out for those. Yeah, so I think what we're saying is that coaches are in a pretty tight spot at the moment. You need to kind of prove yourself as a good coach, but like, for example, so your team wins World Cup, right? Or let's say Overwatch League. Let's go there, because Overwatch League is now the pinnacle of Overwatch, competitively. So you're the coach of London Spitfire, and for whatever reason, this is obviously very hypothetical, but for whatever reason, say you have some sort of an issue with the team, okay? It's easier for you to go and find another team to coach because you coached a team to World Cup, or rather to an Overwatch League win. That's fantastic. But if you were coaching the team that came 175th and you need to try and find another team, you want to stay on that level. You don't necessarily want to be going into tier 2, which there's nothing wrong with tier 2. Thank you very much. But it creates a little bit of a difficulty for coaches to market themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard for players to mark themselves as well. It's difference between being London Spitfire and winning Overwatch League and being 167th or whatever you said. It's you're not very marketable then. So
it comes down to that, that nepotism. You just don't piss anyone off. You be a positive coach. Make sure the players like you.
Yeah.
That way they can still, recommend you. Suggest you to other teams.
Yeah, this is a whole other discussion on like the business of esports in a way, but like nepotism is so big because the ecosystem is so small that like networking is such a big part. And this comes to the whole brand building conversation from earlier, right? Building your brand, you get known by someone, they might well turn around one day to someone and say, "Oh, this guy actually I saw before is really good. His content's great. We should look at hiring him." You can get hired off that kind of stuff alone. I know coaches that have literally been hired because they wrote a really cool piece of content on Reddit, or even just by doing a little video or something for YouTube where the people have gone, well, actually, they know what they're doing. Let's speak to them a bit more. And it all comes down to that, right? And if you, like you say, if you piss the wrong people off, word will spread throughout the scene. If you're a bad player, if you're a toxic player, whatever it might be, people are going to know.
And you see it. You can look at the players, the rosters that get created. You can, if you're in the scene, or if you take enough time to analyze it from outside, you can see the trends of who's on what team with which people, and what team were they on previously or in the past. I mean, you see everybody's still together. The networks aren't really disrupted. You can see where everybody's been since the beginning to now and find those little lines.
Yeah, and it's also important to understand that the coaches and the managers of each tier know each other. They talk to each other. They discuss. You go into any Discord where they share, like any mutual Discord of theirs collectively, and you'll see there is some sort of like player recommendation channel, and it'll be like, this player is great. And then people will say, actually, he was on my team, didn't listen, uncoachable, really toxic. And all the coaches go, yikes.
Well, that's the rough part is, player management role. People like to think that, coming from my perspective, right, since I've been, doing this little like team hunting thing, people like to think, oh, the manager manages the roster. And it's like, well, that's not totally true. The players manage the roster. I remember, I won't call them out, I'm not going to do them like that, but I tried to play, I remember in the Hulk Memorial Cup, I tried to play in that, and I went to play with the team, and one of the players on the team at the time said, oh, if Kephree's on here, I'm not playing with him. And it wasn't even for a real tournament, and so I couldn't play with the team. The team voted me out, and I had to play with a different team.
Feels bad.
So
I'm not gonna, so off the island.
And that's how it works in almost every scenario. So and it's rough because it puts it in a weird position, because let's say I'm a DPS player and that's a DPS player, and you want to join that team. The manager says, hey, what do you guys think about this dude? The two DPS players on the team, why would they want to say yes? Like, what makes them want to say, oh yeah, he's great, bring him aboard, take my job? So it's really
weird.
It is. You're almost asking these players that are 18, 20, to be honest, mature, and almost, I guess, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Humble, not prideful, no ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're asking a lot.
horrible.
You're asking a lot, actually. Yeah.
It's very similar with like casters, coaches, players, like you name it, because you're all sympathizing with each other because you're all in the same boat. You're all striving to get to the top. You all want to do better, and you want to support them, but at the same time, they're your competitor, right?
Yeah.
It's a really weird dynamic that you don't really see anywhere else. I don't know why it's such a prevalent thing in esports. Again, probably because the ecosystem is just so small, but it does make for some people take it the wrong way and go very toxic. Some get too friendly, and some strike that right balance down the middle. And we're still
I
seeing
mean,
people go either
let's
side
not
of
be wrong here. I think that happens in every sport as well in general.
I think it just
Oh, yeah,
happens in life.
absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. But
it's very weird.
I think right now, just letting the players. I think I have really no real. I do have powers of my team, but I'm not the owner of the spot. I'm not the anything, and I think that's the way it should be right now.
Yeah.
Where the players can choose themselves what's happening, what's their future of the team.
Yeah, they gotta have synergy at the end of the day.
Yeah, and also like we have seen things like Jigsaw, for example, if you remember season 1 or 2 of Trials, where their manager just kicked every player and kept one because he liked him, and then the whole team got screwed over for it. And so I think like I don't know, like a player union or something, or
they need like a training course on like mental resiliency before going into the league,
But again, even the Overwatch League, they are looking for they're trying to get a player union together. So even they don't have it. So it's even harder for the tier 2, tier 3 scene to really get established when there's a bunch of 18, 20-year-old kids running around thinking they can kick whoever they want and just by the day.
It's just clicks. It's high school. It's high school again.
Yeah.
I mean, it works for a lot of teams, right? Like Windstrike are a really good team, and I've mentioned them a few times today. Bless them, getting all the plugs. Windstrike are a great example where, for the longest time, season 1, they didn't have a coach. They weren't signed. They got signed, and they then started kind of half working with a guy called Ilka, who, after 2 seasons, they've now brought on and is actually working as their coach. But you speak to their players, and they say, we still work on some things ourselves, and he helps with the parts we're weak at. So that's not so much a player or an org, but the players know what's best for them. They know how they work best and what's going to help them in that situation. If a team is really, really stuck, then maybe the manager goes, all right, it's time for us to bring a coach in. But in most situations, players are more than capable, I think, of knowing what it is that they need to improve.
Yeah. And that's why coaches are on their last life right now,
So, it's tough, man. It's tough. Coach, everyone thinks players get it bad. Coaches, woo.
Oh no. Yeah,
Sorry,
especially
Panda.
in the tier 2, tier 3 teams. The coaches don't get any respect. It's if you were that good, then why aren't you a player? That's anytime you try to correct somebody, they go, well, why aren't you the one playing?
I mean, to be fair, I ended above a couple of my players this last season in ranked, so
yikes!
That helps you out. You get to dodge that bullet at least.
The players are the ones that threaten now getting replaced by coaches. That's the one.
No, but I mean, sometimes I get DMs players saying, "Oh, do you really want to stick to coaching, or do you want to join our team?" And it's no. I mean, right now I actually choose coaching because I think, at least from my perspective, I can do more from the outside than I can as a Lucio shot caller player.
Yeah.
So
I was just about to ask, what do you
just don't want to play goats. You just don't want to play goats.
I mean, okay, you got me there. No, actually, I think goats is really fun compared to the mercy meta, since I'm more of a Lucio liking player than a mercy player.
So die on point.
Is this why Luddy tweeted out? Was like, who else really enjoys playing Lucio? Like, if I say I hate this, sub Pandering, and then I'm screwed. Luddy to coach, boys. That's how it's going.
Yeah.
Bless him.
I want Beyblade meta. I want season 1 Reaper.
Oh,
dude, no.
That is so painful. Like, I'm going to admit to, I don't know, original sin of Overwatch. I am a Mercy One trick, and Beyblade just made me sad.
Beyblade's glorious.
And I'm really glad. I'm gonna say it. I can't wait for the Doomfist nerf. Do you know how many times I've been like, I flew out of that? Nah, fam, I'm dead.
Every single support just sits there and just goes, fucking Doomfist, man, all the time.
I think everybody with less than 250 HP says that statement.
I think
you get Meteor Strike and you're like, well, this is...
Yeah, I think a lot of
Anna with Meteor Strike, like, shit.
I think a lot of keyboards will be saved if you nerf Doomfist, honestly. I'm not gonna call anyone out, but there's been a couple of keyboard smashes I've heard in voice when you get the Doomfisted somewhere across the map.
Yeesh, yeah. That's always fun. And the dumbest thing for me is that Doomfist can like one-shot me into a pole. Like of all things, like a lamppost.
Or a staircase somehow. Sometimes it just clips you. You're like, what?
Butterfly.
That hero is questionable. Thanks, Siegel. I think he was the one who suggested he wanted a melee fighting hero on Twitter before it was released.
By the way, can I just say, by the way, Panda, when you were talking about you being want to play, your whole team jumped into chat and flamed you.
I know. they always try and call me out, but
they were like, "Yeah, shout out to your duo part, a nice 1-6 stacker."
Yeah. But, I mean, they can say anything they want, but that just means I can force them on VOD review for an entire 24 hours if I want to. So they better be quiet. I am a coach now. I can say whatever I want, you know.
Until they decide you're irrelevant, in which case.
Okay. Player recommendations for the next team.
Oh man.
I will say though that there's a lot more opportunity for coaches, obviously in the lower ranks. So tier 1 and tier 2, most of your players are basically able to become coaches themselves, right? Tier 3, there's this.
I wouldn't agree.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Some of the players are kind of dumb.
I mean,
if I'm being honest, man.
Kephrii, you're not wrong. I can tell you that. There's
Dead.
The word ignorance. I don't want to say it's not a bad thing, but there's a lot of players that just don't know what they don't know.
I mean, there are players that are really amazing at clicking heads. They're really amazing at doing what they do, but how much you want to teach them or how much they learn, and it's coming in one year and going out the other. So I wouldn't say everyone is suitable to be coaching.
Yeah.
It's a very small few, if I'm honest.
That's fair enough.
Those people have to be able to put their pride aside, their ego aside, and accept that somebody might know more than them. And that's a scary thought for some 16-year-olds, like, what do you mean? I know the world. It's kind of tough.
There are a lot that try and make that jump between being player and coach as well. Like Christopher's a really good example. Played on the UK roster, then went to become a coach, and now he's off with you. And then you've got guys like Kasaurus doing the same, and there's Pipu. Like there's a good list there in all this as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, why didn't you list me there? I was season 0 contenders players, if you didn't remember.
Yeah.
Okay. I just kidding. No, for sure. Those people really fit their coaching role, I think. When they realize themselves that there are younger, faster.
You gotta have that ability to talk to players, and not hurt their egos and not make them feel like they're being attacked or threatened. Like you have to, you gotta give them the compliments before you give them the criticism. There's a lot to coaching. It takes a pretty mature person to be a successful coach. You really have to be. Yeah.
Communicator, team leader, be able to manage people. Being able to manage people is the biggest one, I think. Because you're still dealing with a lot of young people, right?
You got to be a people person.
When I explain how I coach, I usually say I'm both a kindergarten teacher and like a business manager at the same time. It's
absolutely.
That's brilliant.
That feels exactly right. That explains why my coach talks to me the way he does.
Mm-hmm.
That actually reminds me of there was a tweet that Bren posted couple of months ago, shortly after the off season started, and he was like, apparently first scrim with Canada, Surefour manages to uninstall Windows. And he's like, I don't know what these players are doing during the off season. I think they're licking paint.
I think he tried to delete deleted system 32 or something.
It's all that brain power and clicking heads, man.
Yeah.
And that was the funniest thing I'd read all day. I don't know how you are busy playing Overwatch and suddenly uninstall Windows. Oh, that's brilliant. Beautiful. All right, but I think that basically covers everything that we were going to talk about today. I don't know if you guys have any last minute thoughts before we get into the last couple of questions. Before we get into that, just a reminder, guys, if you do have questions for our guests, please, we have an EU Contenders caster/analyst. We have a coach for the tier 2 scene, and we have Kephrii. So if you have questions,
Widowmaker.
Wow.
Hey.
I play Widowmaker.
That's pretty much
but
it.
I'm already Tracer. So if you do have questions, please just post them in the chat. Guys, any last thoughts before we head on to the couple of questions that have come through?
Yeah, that's when are you gonna start being biased towards SMCEU on the desk?
I'm going to give you more. Right. If lightning strikes once, okay. If it strikes twice, fair play, I have reason. Like I say, you guys beat Angry Titans. You had a really good series against Hurricanes. So next week, you got my shield. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
I'm
Then
not
I'm
stupid
done.
enough to get debated 3 times in a row.
Yeah,
Don't worry
good. Then I'm
about
done with the questions.
that.
All right, cool. So there is one question that some dude had been spamming, yo. Obviously not understanding about the Q&A at the end of the session. So let me start with that question. Dude is a hernia. I think he even like tagged me and everything.
I hope that's not my
Kephrii.
chat. Damn it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go on
Thanks,
10 minutes now.
everyone.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What do you think about a Contenders coach saying that in Contenders, winning actually isn't the most important thing, in reference to players being good but not winning games?
So I okay, that's like there's like a double edge in there. So obviously the coach for the team wants you to win, but at the same time, the coach's job is to improve the players individually and as a team. So I could see how a coach would say both things. It's important to win, since he's the coach of the team and he's in the org, but it's also important for him as a coach to do his job, right? And if even one of the 6 players is willing to learn, willing to improve and gets better, then that coach, just like a kindergarten teacher, if as long as one student, learns something, then he's doing his job. And then so I think for the coach personally, then yeah, if a coach says that, then that's probably the most important thing to them, is that they've succeeded in their job.
Makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Anything to add to that, guys?
I
Yeah.
mean,
If
when you're
you go
playing in
first, go on, Panda.
contenders, when you're playing in contenders, winning is of course important. But,
Oh,
so
even if you win contenders, there's no
I mean,
guarantee you get signed to
no,
Overwatch
for
League.
sure
You got to get money on the table. You get food on the
You could
table
win.
somehow,
You could
man.
win all of contenders and actually get nothing. For
no,
it.
but
It's-
like that's what you're screaming for. You're not screaming to lose in contenders.
Yeah.
You're screaming to win. You scream to win every single map. Sure, we got smashed the first week, but that just it's a learning experience, and it's like super. When your team performs and when they play at their best, they should win, or else why are you there? Like then you shouldn't be
Yeah.
in contenders. Then you should
Yeah.
switch the roster or something. So I think winning plays a big part, but it's not
Yeah.
the world if you lose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially like when you're trying to improve, like there's some games that you go into like in a scrim and you're probably not going to win because you're trying a new strategy. And in that scenario, then obviously, winning's not the important thing. It's improving so you can eventually go to the main goal of winning. But yeah, I mean, obviously at the end of the day, you want to win.
Yeah, I think you can still be. If you're a player that's on a team that isn't playing super well, you can still be noticed and get picked up or given better opportunities. Like one guy that always springs to mind for me last season that we spoke about a lot was Asking, one of the players who now plays on Uprising Academy. The guy was a machine, and we knew that, even though the team finished, I think they lost in the quarterfinals of playoffs, for example. Didn't have to make the final just to show that he was a good player. It's more for the coach, I think, that you want to see the team that does well in coaching. Although I've seen coaches have been picked up even when their team has finished, even outside of playoffs itself. So there's kind of it depends, right? Again, it comes down to that brand building. There's so many factors at play that it's hard to say just winning is important or
we
not
can
winning isn't
wrap back to
important.
what we talked about before, where
Yeah,
people recommend you for being like they know you're super like
Yeah.
they know you're good at coaching. They know you're bringing a positive mental attitude to the team
exactly.
and everything. So
PMA.
PMA, that's really important for our team. So yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to move this along because there are a couple of questions. Wow. This one is kind of silly, but it's my favorite question. Thanks, Trid. For AlmostPanda, do you blame your losses on Shu removing his hat?
I mean, he did put it back on. So
he lied. He said he was doing it at Christmas, and he's done it already.
yeah, I mean, it's December now, so I guess. But I mean, sure, we blame Shu for all of our map losses.
Nice. Okay, let me just scroll up to the questions up at the top here. Okay. Kitten Squad says, my question is, tell Kephrii good luck in the match on Friday, and I hope he wins.
All right, that's a little biased. I like this. Okay.
Okay. Kephrii, what do you think? What would be a good fix for this tight spot in inverted commas for coaches?
I mean, again, it's making a coach invaluable, right? And how the only way to do that right now a coach can become invaluable, or I'm sorry, like useless if the players get good, right? Get good forehead.
Yeah.
The player gets good, the coach has to get fired. The only way to make the coach have an invaluable role is if, there's something only the coach can do. And that would be, players can do their own bot review. Players can do literally everything a coach does right now. So that means that you'd have to make a role for the coach in the game. Whether it's only being able to view the 6 monitors on a main stage, standing behind them, physically looking, or if it's a face cam spectator client and you're a 7th desk. I mean, you got to make it to where the coach actually has a job that no one else can do. I don't think we have that issue yet because the players aren't. I mean, I'm actually amazed coaches lasted this long. I'm not gonna lie. I'm really amazed. Then again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. With how players, aren't all the brightest.
I
But,
mean, that's also because Overwatch is such a complex game
yeah,
that I think even players that have over 2 years of experience in Overwatch and have played for a really long time, they still, I think there's so much to learn
Yeah.
that even the best players actually haven't learned it all yet.
yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
they still need coaches, even the best ones. So
Yeah. It's a whole different perspective. Like when you, especially because most players, they have, they're anywhere from one, in some cases, one hero, to, up to like 5 or 6 that they're really freaking good at. But there's always that perspective that you don't get when you're not a master at those other, 20 something heroes. And I think that's where the coach kind of comes in, can see objectively.
All right, next question. And this is another one that's just been spammed over and over again. Guys, I did type it in chat. Please, it's not necessary to spam your questions. Our producer, he doesn't have much else to do at the moment. He just clicked stream, and here we are. So he is looking out for your questions. Don't worry. If I don't get to your question, more likely we ran out of time, and less likely then I just didn't feel like answering it. Okay, so the next question was, and this will be aimed at everybody: should armor be nerfed?
oh, this is my boy Fawad writing this because he is also one of these tracer specialists. Really dislikes Brigitte and armor. So I know why he's asking that question.
I don't know if armor needs to be nerfed. It depends on what you mean by nerfed. Like armor. Sorry, I'm like one of those guys. My background is always well, it depends on what you mean. So armor, do you mean nerf directly? Like armor's damage reduction goes down. The quantity of it, whatever. I think the heroes that are meant to shred armor should probably shred armor. Reaper, for example, not being able to shred armor, it kind of like blows my brain. Like I don't understand that. Roadhog should probably shed armor. Even Torbjorn probably should shred armor, considering he's shooting like molten shit at you. I could see how like Widowmaker's ultimate, it could be armor piercing rounds at some point without being too broken. But I think armor should be able to be pierced by characters that should pierce them. It kind of makes it strange that armor doesn't. I don't know. It's weird. It doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, I think armor could be nerfed a little, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least don't make it stack under the shield for Zarya and Zen.
Yeah, have it on top, even on blue shield. That's one thing I really.
Although, of course, Kephrii would be calling for Widowmaker to have armor piercing round.
Hey, give me a Diva Matrix 24/7, all directions. I want to shoot Bastion rounds.
The super hybrid hero, just for Kephrii.
The Widow meta, I think, had the best viewership. Widow, McCree, Soldier, like I think it had the best viewership. But then again, I mean, it was early stages. It's hard to say that, but
that too.
I'd like to see her come back.
Yeah. I actually have a question here in chat if I can answer it. So this guy has been asking me all the time because I played for Team Esperati in Season 0 Contenders, and this guy has been spamming, where did the players go? And I actually keep in contact with some of the players, even though most of them left the scene. It's only me and Gustav left in the scene, and he plays for Young and Beautiful, if you all know. But for to just wrap it up quick, I know Thrawn went to Fortnite, Course went to studying, and Source 7, I actually have no clue where he's going. So now I answered that question for you.
The mystery.
Thank you for that. Yeah. All right, next question is for Dez, and it also comes from Trid. Broadcasters have a lot of power in shaping narrative around players. How good is that, though? He could have just tapped your shoulder and be like, "Hey guys."
Is he going to shit talk me here? Go on, then. Let's hear it.
Okay. Broadcasters have a lot of power in shaping narrative around players. Without naming players, do you feel you may have created a narrative about a player that was disingenuous? And then for the rest of the panel, do you get frustrated with Contenders broadcast?
Okay, I'll go first because then my answer might let them go. Yeah, I get frustrated when this guy says shit like this. Say not naming players. For about 2 or 3 weeks, I kept saying KSP was 16 years old because I got told he was. Turned out it was Mirror who was 16 years old. And so eventually, Blue Coffee's manager, I think it was Lucky Mojo, was just like, "Can you stop calling him 16? He's like 21." And I was like, oh. So that wasn't the best one as well. Making someone else be far younger than they are, can't play an Overwatch League at that age. Yeah, not really the best idea, but there you go. I think we're all guilty of. Obviously, there's no way we can know every single player super in depth. So sometimes you have to speak to other players, to coaches, whatever, to form your opinions. And that's not a bad thing with that. That's how everyone learns and grows. And sometimes you will get a view from those conversations, which you'll then use and repeat elsewhere. I think that in that case, sometimes you can get it wrong. And when we do tend to correct ourselves and come back and repeat it. I still stand by what I said about you, Mouse. You were a one-trick tracer. Now you're a good player. Don't worry. I really appreciate you these days. That's one of those kind of example things, right? Where you do have to form your own narrative, and sometimes it can be wrong. And the most important thing you can do is admit you were wrong and to say, okay, actually, maybe what we saw this guy before wasn't fully formed. Now we've seen the real player that we all wanted to see that long time ago.
And that happens a lot in streaming world. You know, a lot of
absolutely.
It's very easy for a streamer to push one topic, and the next thing you know, it's in every chat.
Yeah, no, and like everyone in our team always watch the VODs like after our games and stuff, and I think you guys have like I don't know if I want to say big burden on your shoulder, but you have like big like you have the opportunity to lift players up and push players down way more than I think you know. The power you have is like so big because a lot of the talent scouts and everything, they don't know what's going on the inside. They just listen to the casters and they're like, oh well, this guy said, oh, Mouse is really good, but in reality maybe it was someone else in the team that like made him look good. And so when they then later pick him up, maybe it doesn't perform because he's a tracer one trick, you know. So there's all these sort
Gotta
of
call
things.
him what he is, man.
Yeah. No, but for me, like when I listen to the broadcast and you say stuff about play, it doesn't faze me at all because I'm not a player. But holy moly, my players, they have strong opinions of what all of you guys have
Hey, look, man. It's part of the job, right? Like we know this is going to happen as well. Like, and if players speak to us, like we're more than happy to listen and correct things. Opinions are opinions, though, right? And we're all aware it can have a strong influence. Like Blizzard made a very strong point in season 1 of you're here to big these guys up and make them look good.
Yeah,
which is really difficult when you do want to say this guy's just made a real big fuck up in this play, and it's because of X, Y, and Z. It's a fine line to tread, and we do get it wrong sometimes. We're not perfect. We all admit that. And like I say, if any player does want to talk, I'm always more than happy to take a DM. It's no problem at all.
I mean, that's a big problem in our local casting as well. A lot of casters misunderstand and they believe that they are the show and people come to watch them talk about this game. And that's not it at all.
No.
You are not the main attraction. You are like your only purpose, your sole purpose is to give context of what the people are seeing and to big up the players and the teams. Like
we have a very good saying actually that if they're talking about us, we're not doing. They should be speaking about the players and about what they're doing, which is why if you look at chat and you see Pog everywhere and Lil and so on, that's the best case. And if we can add colorful content around that and make a moment more memorable, that's what we're here to do.
100%. Yep. Okay, let's move on. Ooh, question for me. What do you think of the Overwatch marketing in tier 2 and 3? Don't you think that Overwatch League screws other tiers and tournaments? Yeah, that's also here. Yeah, that's a difficult one.
What is your answer for this one? I'd like to hear this.
Yeah, me too. I'm really interested actually.
So
the most
some
honest
people
answer.
No, some people know that, and I have no problem saying this. I have been helping contribute with the Path to Pro community Twitter account, and we've got people from all different regions, and we watch the Contenders games, and we give score updates and add some highlight plays and stuff like that. Because at the moment, the main Path to Pro account has been having some difficulties, and it's purely because of a staffing issue. We know that. When I say we at the Path to Pro community Twitter, we understand. We know there was, I think there was some people that left or got laid back. I don't know the full story, but they
Small
were
indie
understaffed.
company, yeah.
Heavily understaffed, and so they weren't able to produce the kind of content that they could be. So we started up this extra Twitter account just to like give them a hand. I know there's been a lot of backlash about it, and I want people to understand that we're not trying to take anybody's jobs. We're not trying to create dissension amongst the ranks. We're not trying to pretend that we are Path to Pro. The moment that the Path to Pro Twitter account does manage to get back on its feet, our account will be deactivated. But people need to understand that at the moment, there are some troubles that Blizzard are going through. They had to replace a lot of their production staff. They've had to replace a lot of their social media staff. It's not as simple as, well, Blizzard aren't doing anything. That's not what it
really
is.
on them either. I mean, like you see with traditional sports, like the viewership's always for the for the lower echelons is always lower. It's not like the NFL is putting college games on the big screen. I mean, really it's on the audience and almost I guess the consumer, if you will. It's on them to really help grow those scenes and watch them and participate and engage and all that stuff. It's not really on Blizzard as much. Sure, they could advertise it more, but eventually they would just start spamming every single game in open, every contenders for all the regions. It would just be a cluster. It would decrease viewership as a whole for the whole game if they started doing that.
Again, it's a whole discussion to have as well. That's for another day, no doubt. But the whole business side of it as well is there's a lot of focus. I think you look at like Blizzard and Riot at the minute, there is a lot of focus on making esports profitable because so many companies take huge rounds of investment, spend millions and millions on marketing, on hiring talent, on doing all this fancy stuff like social media management included, and then burn out and have to close the game down or completely strip things away. Blizzard and Riot are both trying to run a very tight ship. And that might come at the cost for a short time of social media, but it's a good thing they've got a community around them that are willing to pick the slack up like you guys have done. And I think that's very going to be essential, if nothing else, to keeping tier 2 alive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the discussion you can have on this subject is very long, and I think there's a lot of arguments going on. I think this would have to take up almost an entire podcast if we were to.
It's funny because it kind of ties into that question earlier about like broadcasters or entertainers shaping narratives and whatnot. The tier 2 scene complaining about the tier 2 scene is almost shooting itself in the foot. If they were talking about how great the tier 2 scene was and pushing it, it would actually draw more attention and draw more viewership because people would want to check it out. By talking about how miserable it is, they're almost essentially pushing people away from watching it.
Yeah.
So I wish the tier 2 scene would learn that
it feeds that narrative of it's crap.
Yeah, they're hurting themselves, and I guess I'm in the scene now. So can we stop doing that?
So Kephrii, how great is tier 2?
Oh, it's fantastic. Tier pack is
dude, I love it, man. It's so good.
Bumping region ever.
We love tier 2 here. I will say that a lot of especially the Broadcast.gg people, after World Cup, there were so many tweets that went out from so many of the staff going, hey guys, you see these amazing people that have been doing cool things? Do you know where they came from? They came from tier 2, fun fact. So like South America, Brazil did so well in the World Cup. Fusions and Kib coming from British Hurricanes. Like there were so many phenomenal players that came up from the tier 2 scene, and people don't know. They watch World Cup and they go, who are these guys? We've never seen them in Overwatch League. Like you should be watching tier 2. And Kephrii, you're 100% right. This narrative that players and staff and so on are perpetuating. When I say staff, I mean like team staff, coaches, managers, that kind of thing. The narrative about, oh, tier 2 is so terrible, Blizzard doesn't support it, ugu. People don't want to then support it. They're like, well, this is a bad thing. Why should I watch it? What I will say, and this kind of deviates, this isn't a question that somebody else sent, but there's been a narrative around, should pro players with high streaming numbers be promoting that? And in essence, basically cutting their streams and their revenue short in order to raid or host contenders channels.
So I got hit with that. Yeah, so I got hit with this actually before Contender. It was actually just when the Overwatch League started. There was a lot about this that I could talk about from behind the scenes. But long story short, like I had meetings with Twitch actually themselves, talking about, hey, Overwatch League's talking to us. They want to do these for the streamers. How do we help each other? Overwatch League was really concerned because they're so like in NA I would stream 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. that was the exact time that a match was in Overwatch League. So I would lose, 80% of my viewers instantly. And then, they would go and play reruns on top of it, which destroyed everyone else's viewership. At the end of the day, people have to realize that like the streamers, they have their own jobs. They had those jobs before Overwatch League, even during, it doesn't matter. Really, it's on the entertainer to become more entertaining, or it's on the league to try to deconflict to the best of their ability. It was a really tough one. I remember it's like one of the conversations behind the scenes was, should Overwatch League to give back after after taking all of those viewers, that chose to go there, should they host streamers instead of contenders, so that way streamers kind of get that viewership back and cycle through lists, or they experimented. Actually, I did one. It was an advertisement for the streamer inside of Overwatch League itself. So during a commercial break, it would show a streamer and it would, kind of advertise them in the league to try to kind of give them a one-off, like, hey, sorry, we did this. So there's a lot of stuff that they're trying to figure out and do, but that's a tricky one. I mean, it's really tricky.
The only time where I take issue is when someone will publicly go out, and it's not like they're trying to deliberately like farm engagement by posting about this stuff because it's a meme thing to kind of do these days. It's the cool thing to say. Is when they come out and they're like, man, we should do more to support tier 2. Content creators should do more for this. And then they stream while Contenders is on. Now, the problem is Contenders it's not a 24/7 broadcast, but you have like North America, regions, Australia, Europe, back to back. And these things last 6-7 hours each. You have like 2 days a week being wiped out by Contenders. Then there's Overwatch League as well.
No, you're
like
right.
You say, you guys have got jobs and you've got to build a brand as well. It's just like
I think where it started. Yeah, so and I think where it started was there used to only be like Go-To Gamers, and it was a very easy time schedule. The streams only stream the finals. It was very easy to work around the schedule for the tournaments. There was very few and important ones. So back then, you would shut your stream off, you would host, you'd show respect, and kind of do that. And then once Overwatch League got created, that's when the content creators kind of just unanimously said, hey, none of us are going to do that because we have to maintain our jobs.
Absolutely.
So, that's kind of like where the shift happened, and a lot of the turmoil was, in the beginning, people didn't understand why we weren't shutting streams down. So I think people realize now that it's not on the content creator. If anything, it's on Blizzard to try to give back to those content creators that are affected by it.
Yeah, and ultimately helping build the game up.
Yeah,
making that content. Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, we are running out of time, unfortunately, so I only have one more question, and I'm really sorry to everyone I didn't get their questions. But what you can do is you can tweet us, and we will send your questions on and see if we can get replies from these guys with very busy lives and schedules. But for the last question, and it was a difficult one to pick, but I'm going to go with this one. Beyond obvious visa issues, now this one is aimed at Dez and Kephrii, what are some of the problems that can arise when traveling abroad for work in esports, and how have you overcome them?
Well, you can come to Kiev. We're in Ukraine right now, and the country's half under martial law because of what's going on with Russia. So if you want to know about issues, like we got a whole list of things here for you. I'll go first, I guess. I've already started talking. It's not too bad in terms of travel, to be fair. Like a lot of my travel and work has been in Europe. I live in the UK, so it's super easy for me to get to. Going out to things like the States, I haven't been to the States myself, but I've got a lot of colleagues who have. Trying to get in there sometimes can be an absolute pain in the arse. So ultimately, it depends how far you need to go and where you need to work for it, for example. Outside of visa stuff, issues, nothing massive, to be honest with you. Like, food is food. Like, speaking to people is speaking to people. Even if you don't understand each other, you can gesture and so on and so forth. Like, we're having a fine time out here in Kiev. Sure, it's cold and it's snowing, but we're having a good time. It's not that bad. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. So for me, it's a little weird, right? Because I'm like the one dude that's decided to leave America. Most players get imported from other countries into NA. NA gets kicked down a scene, get replaced by better players from other regions. I've kind of done this ass backwards thing where I left NA and joined a Korean team. So for me, it's not so much the visa issue; it's the second part, which is the communication aspect. There's a lot of differences. Like right now, I'm in an Airbnb. It's very strange. It looks like Hanamura. I'm being eaten alive by mosquitoes in my own house, which is really strange to me. They eat through the off spray. I don't know how that's possible. They're like, anyways, So apart from that, the communication aspect for me specifically, I can't speak to everybody who's ever traveled. For me, it's very difficult. I don't know any Korean. I have a spreadsheet Google Doc that I put on my other monitor. So while I play, I'm like, shit, he's above. We, you know, yeah, he's above. Yeah. I'm like, you know, my accent's wrong. Like, I'm not pronouncing the right shit. The team just laughs at me.
Now you feel how the European scene feels overall, because there's so few like having English as their mother tongue.
And we're so self-absorbed as a country in America that everyone needs to learn English because fuck it, I don't want to learn the other language. And I say that, and I'm still not learning Korean, and I have no intention of really learning Korean. I'm memorizing the phrases that I use, obviously the call outs. When it comes to traveling regular stuff, I'll try to make this really quick since it's the last question. Food, everything here has pictures on the menu. I point to shit. I have Google Translate. I use 1 to 3 words maximum. You know, hit Google Translate. I showed somebody like yesterday, I wrote mosquito in house with a frowny face. I hit translate. I found the oldest guy in the market and I handed him my phone. And he's like, oh, fucking hands me 3 cans of shit and we're good to go.
Wow.
For my
God
team,
bless technology, right?
Yeah. So for communicating with my team in scrims, I have no clue what they're saying at any point in time. I understand the words like, oh, Helman Hey. Like I know someone's yelling winnable. And I'm like, okay, I can go in and I'm not if I hear Helman Hey. You know, apart from that, as a result, my coach has to work extra hard. I have to memorize the position of all 5 of my teammates. I have to memorize what their intent is, what they're going to do, why they're going to do it, how they're going to do it. So that way I don't need to talk to them. So that way I just know, oh, in this scenario, they're going to try to do this. I need to try to do this. And essentially I just sit there quietly until, you know, I can yell like P ill, which is 1 shot, and that's all I know how to say. And so, you know, I made them learn like the word bubble, you know, stuff like that. But it's communication's really freaking hard for me. There's a lot, like if you could hear my comms, man, there's some times where I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I wish I could show you guys my scrim footage. I really do.
All right, that is absolutely all we have time for. This has been a fantastic episode. Thank you once again to my guests. They were, for those that weren't paying attention or can't read, Dezachu, AlmostPanda, and Kephrii. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. We will have new guests, new topics, and yeah, it's been really great having you guys here. Thank you to everyone that came out to watch. It's been really phenomenal, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having us.
Ever, give me a high five.
Oh,
we're gonna
this way. Okay.
Stop
it.